Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for being here this wonderful day, very sunny here in Costa Rica. And special thanks to Babak Alaj, Alaj and to our friends from Peru and from the National University of Trujillo in Peru. And well, today we are here to listen to the talk on translation, localization, and transcreation. And it is a real privilege for me to introduce our expert this afternoon, Babak Alaj, to you. Mr. Alaj has a distinguished career and great depth of experience in this field. He has a Master of Arts in Terminology and Language Engineering from the University of Applied Sciences in Cologne, Germany. He has a Master in Translation and Interpretation of the University of Applied Sciences in Cologne, Germany. He is a member of NAAT, Accredited Professional Translator in Australia, and he has been a localization specialist in Germany, China, Australia. Here at the University of Costa Rica, he teaches German and English. So let's welcome Babak Alaj.
Thank you, Patricia. Thank you. I would like to take this opportunity and thank you all for coming, and Patricia for her initiative to ask me to do this. And it's my pleasure to give you guys a lowdown on what is exactly localization and what it entails. This topic is quite broad, so I'm going to keep it really short. I really try to put this into a really short time to give you guys explanations of what it is. The focus is on localization, as I'm sure you guys are all pursuing a degree in translation. So the main focus is going to be on localization and transcreation, what it is while you translate content. While I'm explaining and giving you guys the explanations, if you guys have any questions, please don't hesitate to raise your hands or just tell me what you want to say, or just interrupt me. There's no problem at all. So I'm gonna share my screen with you guys first to show you guys some bullet points that I have prepared. It seems to. All right. So you guys can see this? Is that okay? Excellent. All right. I'm not trying to, I try to keep the screen small because if I zoom in, it shuts down for some reason. I don't know. All right. So as you know, we're talking about translation, localization, and transcreation. The focus is going to be on localization, as all of you guys know what actually translation is. You guys are pursuing a translation degree probably. We're going to go over the three terminologies: translation, localization, and transcreation. Then I'm going to give you guys a lowdown on why localization is important in global market, why you need it, why companies need it, and if you pursue a degree in translation, how you can specialize in localization and be a great asset to within the global market. And we're going to look at globalization cycle, why that is important, and of course internationalization, which is part of the globalization, and it's directly related to localization. And we're going to look at some examples, good examples and bad examples of localization. Basically, when you mistranslate, or if you do not localize content, what happens, what's the reaction. And then we're going to look at some localization and CAT tools. CAT stands for computer aided translation tools, basically, which are actually these localization tools. And then we're going to look very briefly at some examples of these tools, how the user interface would work. So I'm going to go over translation first. What's a translation? Well, you guys are familiar, very well acquainted with the term translation. When you translate, basically, it's a process of rendering text from one language to another language. So the main result is important. How you get there is actually not a problem. If you look at one simple sentence, how old are you? If you want to translate that into Spanish, ¿cuántos años tienes? We use a different verb, right? The verb tener in Spanish, whereas in English, it's the verb to be. So we might change verbs. So it's the end result that is important in translation. We don't really care how we get there. We might have to change a lot of things. We have to take into account connotations and denotations, etc. And localization basically goes beyond that. When we talk about localization and a localization specialist, what a localization specialist does is they adapt the content to the cultural differences. And that's the main focus of localization. And translation is part of localizing content. When you localization is more comprehensive. It's a comprehensive process and addresses cultural and non-textual components when you translate. For example, it comes from software background. When big companies started to develop software for global market, they realized that they can't just translate software. They have to localize it. They have to adapt it to local differences, right? We all know that Spanish spoken in Mexico is different than Spanish spoken in Costa Rica and all the other countries, right? Spanish spoken in Spain is different than, so you cannot just translate software or content in Spanish and market it in all Spanish-speaking countries. English is the same. English spoken in America is different than English spoken in England, Australia, Canada, South America, South Africa. So when we localize basically content, we have to take into account the spelling. You know that in English, North American English, the spelling is different than British English, right? So the meanings are different. We use different words in North America than they use in Great Britain, for example, elevator, lift. We use imperial versus metric measurements, units. The units are different, right? We in North America and in the States, we use basically imperial units, miles, yard, foot, inch, and metric units are used in Central America, Europe, etc. So they have to be taken into account when translating, when localizing content into another one. And that's where we have to take into account when we look at the globalization cycle. Of course, localization is a big part of it. So in order to be able to localize our content, we have to think in advance, and that's called internationalization. Nowadays, big companies such as Apple, Microsoft, they have to think in advance to be able to market their content into other cultures, basically countries, right? And thinking in advance is when they, for example, develop a new mobile app, especially nowadays with different mobile apps that have to be translated into many languages. If they, for example, if they hard code formats, time, date, they can't be translated. Translatable text cannot be leveraged from source code. And if that can't be done, then there's a problem with localizing, right? Later on, I'm going to show you guys a couple of bad examples of localizing, of internationalization, basically, where companies did not think in advance properly. And if we're talking about billions of dollars, if you don't do that at the match, then you have to do the job again and manually, and that requires a lot of time and money, of course. So why do we actually localize? Why do we have to adapt it to a new culture? It's only 20% of world population speak English, and over 70% of the population don't even look at the app if it's not in their local language. So it is important to localize, to basically adapt it, not only translate, but also adapt it to the cultures. When you adapt the content or the text to a culture, you automatically need new audience. You have new markets. That's a big advantage for companies. Companies want to have that, especially with in the 21st century with all these mobile apps and Microsoft, Apple, big tech companies, especially big tech companies, spend millions of dollars to localize their product properly. And later on at the end, I'm going to show you guys where you can actually pursue a master's degree in localization. And it started in Europe. I think you can actually do that in the States. Few universities offer this this master's degree. It's quite interesting for you guys if you want to have continue with your degrees as a translator or interpreter. So you reach new markets, which is absolutely valuable for big companies, and it gives you a competitive edge. These companies want to have edge over the other companies. The more audience you have, the more money you make, right? And when you reach customer satisfaction, when people around the world use your mobile app, they want to buy more from your company, more apps. So the more audience you reach, the more edge you get from that. And of course, customer satisfaction comes with it. If more people are happy with that, they buy more, and you actually achieve a better result. And brand loyalty is part of the internationalization, that more and more people come constantly and buy your apps and products. And of course, you maximize profit, which is absolutely essential to big companies when developing new products. Now, internationalization, I explained to you what internationalization is and how do we think in advance. What do we make when we want to develop, when companies want to develop a new product, software, content, advertising, even advertising, they have to look at different aspects of the product. First of all, to make this product, software, whatever it is, content, easy to be able to leverage translatable text from source code, because all these mobile apps have source code, embedded source code. These source codes have to be separated from translatable text. And that's where we later on look at some localization tools where we can, a localization specialist work with localization tools, with the CAT tools, to separate and leverage translatable text from source code to translate it and then put it together again and have the piece of software in a new language, right? So these products have to be able, they should not be hard coded, and then they have to support multiple languages and multiple formats. All German. Some of you guys are studying German. The German language is always longer. We have longer words than English words, right? So all these drop down menus and symbols in a software, in a program, need more space. And then some languages are from right to left. Some others, Asian languages, are vertical. So they have to be all taken into account before developing a product. So it's easy to translate, to localize. The early ages of software and programs, they didn't support this, and so they were really hard to localize, to translate into different languages. I want to show you guys later. Here, actually, if you look at this example, you see that this is a software, right? A piece of software that most software programs are developed in the States or in English. So they just take into account one language, which is English. And if you look at different languages like German or French, in this case, even Spanish and Italian, they don't fit here, right? So this is a bad internationalization, where when the translator wants to translate this into different languages, because a piece of software, you give it to different translator and they translate it in their own languages, and then give it to the manager, to the project manager, to put them together again. And then as you see here, we have problems with space. Other languages take up much more space than English, right? English is a very concise language. Here we can see that there's a problem with this. So there was a problem with internationalization. So localization doesn't take place here. It won't work here. So we have to send it back to the developer to make some changes, which requires a lot of money again. When we localize, I'm going to show you guys a couple of examples on good and bad localization, which involves translation as well. So if you look at, for example, this sentence in English, 2 pounds of strawberries cost $10 and will be delivered to you on the date. This, of course, this text is in English, American English, right? And when we want to translate this into Spanish, the literal translation would be this below. 2 libras de fresas cuestan $10 y se le entregarán el y la fecha. Now, if we want to translate this in Mexico, right, it wouldn't work for Mexican market because in Mexico they probably don't know what libras is, and the date is completely different than the format that they use in Mexico, for example, or even in Costa Rica, right? So this would be a translation. If we want to localize this, then we have to take other cultural differences and preferences into account. So if we want to translate this for Mexican culture and audience, for example, that would be the right translation and localization. If we don't localize, if you don't localize your text and don't, this leads me actually to the next to the last one, which was transcreation. Transcreation and localization go hand in hand. When you translate, you constantly recreate and re-engineer your content and target and tailor it to the audience that you have, whether or not it's in Spain and Latin America, Europe, what market. It's important to see what market it is. Transcreation is a portmanteau word, as you see. It's two words. Portmanteau words are when you put two words together and create a new one. That's a portmanteau word, like brunch, for example, right? Breakfast and lunch. Ginormous, from gigantic and enormous. So translation and creation, we put them together. It's transcreation. So transcreation is part of localization and translation, which means that you re-engineer your brand that resonates exactly in the same way that resonates in one particular culture, so that the message behind it is exactly the same message. I want to show you guys now also a couple of examples for bad and good transcreation and localization. They go hand in hand. When you translate, you localize and you transcreate. So basically, the target audience is very important. If a piece of software wants to be translated for Latin America, the person that translated has to know the culture, Latin American culture. Um, it's not just sufficient to know Spanish. You have to know the cultural differences, and uh, um, to be able to recreate the same message. Now, here's a couple of examples. I'm sure you guys are familiar with with the with the famous ad "Got Milk" in the States, right? Got Milk. It was basically when they came up with this ad. It was now those from the States can back me up on this. It was to basically encourage people to consume more dairy products, not only milk, but dairy products in general. And then they tried to, it worked very well in the States, right? And they tried to market it in Latin America. And then they came up with a translation, right? Got milk, toma leche, right? It didn't work well at all because all of you guys are experts in Spanish. You know that toma leche doesn't really create the same message as got milk. So it created a lot of controversy in Latin America. And then they came up with another translation, tienes leche? And I don't know actually if you guys have seen this before or not, but it also created a lot of controversy in Latin American countries, which really doesn't resonate with people at all. And it kind of creates, it can be from funny to sexist. The literal translation of tienes leche is "are you lactating?" And it doesn't work. So they had to really come up, and that's where localization and transcreation is very, very important. A group of people sat down together and really came up with completely a different idea for got milk, which they came up with this one: familia, amor y leche. Right? So that's a very good that's a good example of transcreation, where you don't really translate, you try to recreate the message behind something. And if you guys later are interested to be involved in translation and localization, this is what you have to do basically. And this is what I've been telling my students, that if when you learn a language, when you most of you guys will eventually translate into your own native language. Learning a language and being able to translate into that language doesn't only involve learning words. You have to get acquainted with the culture, right? So a lot of people, a lot of words have, apart from meanings that they have, the annotations, they have also connotations, right? So you have to understand those connotations and cultural differences in one language, especially when it comes to Spanish and English. Spanish language is spoken in so many countries, and each Spanish is different. The same with English. If we look at some other, an example that didn't really work with, that didn't really, was not successful, was a lot of, I'm sure a lot of, when you watch different movies that are translated, the title is translated into Spanish. Some of these translations have nothing to do with the actual translation, right? Sometimes they can't even translate one to one. So they write the English version and then they come up with a Spanish version, like the Fast and Furious, right? In Spanish, they write Fast and Furious and then a todo gas. Now, I don't consider this a good transcreation. I don't consider it a good. Uh, it should have been done much better. Some other disasters, for example, that have happened in the past is, for example, take a look at this one. I'm sure you guys know the movie Die Hard. If you look at the actual title, it's Die Hard with a Vengeance, and they translated La Jungla de Cristal, and then with the Vengeance, they translated La Venganza. Right? This is a good example of a bad transcreation or localization even. With a vengeance is not what it is La Venganza in Spanish, for example. With a vengeance is with all your power. It's almost a saying. It's an idiom, with a vengeance. So if you do something with a vengeance, you do it with all your power, which it was translated literally with a vengeance. The translator thought, okay, it's a vengeance, it's venganza, so La Venganza, right? And Die Hard, La Jungla de Cristal, doesn't really resonate with people the same way it did in the States, for example, Die Hard. Another example would be Home Alone. You know that one, right? Mi pobre angelito. It's a bad example of transcreation. This one went absolutely south. A lío embarazoso. Knocked up means to get pregnant, right? But they translated as lío embarazoso, which is completely different, right? From knocked up. It has a completely different meaning, so it doesn't really resonate with people. These are bad examples of transcreation. And KFC also made a faux pas here, and you know, the logo of KFC, finger licking good. If you translate that into Mandarin, it's eat your fingers off. So they can't actually translate this. They have to come up with something like this one that we've seen before. You really have to re-engineer, not translate anymore, but re-engineer the idea. What is behind the finger licking good, right? Idea. It's an idea behind that. There was another one that it was a brand, Chevrolet, the brand Chevrolet model. They had a brand was Nova. Some of you guys are familiar with this one, Nova. They tried to market that in Latin American countries, and if you say it in the same way Spanish people would say it, Nova, right? It doesn't really, a car that would say Nova, no funciona. It doesn't really work well. So you have to come up with a new name for this car in Latin American market. So it's not just translating. And there are so many other examples, but I didn't want to. It really takes up much time to go through all these. But the examples are quite interesting. And I had a couple more examples, but I think we were running out of time. For example, here is another example of transcreation. Transcreation, as I told you, it comes from advertising. So if you really if you want to market a brand, a piece of software, a content in a new culture, in a new country, you really have to transcreate it. You have to re-engineer everything. McDonald's had a product, Mac Rice Burger, which didn't really go well in India. They had really to come up with another one, which was Mac Paneer. Because you know that cows in India is considered sacred, so they wouldn't work. No one would eat that, so they had to come up with a vegetarian meal or something to tailor it to that things. Even if in Costa Rica, you guys, if you go to McDonald's in the morning, you have gallo pinto, for example, right? You don't have burgers, but whereas when you go to a German McDonald's, it's completely different, right? It's completely different. So I think McDonald's had a great job, did a great job to tailor it tailor its meals for every culture. If you go in any country, McDonald's is different. There are different ads, even different ads with different names. So going back to localization, a localization specialist knows and works with different CAT tools, with localization tools. Without localization tools, you can't actually work very well. It takes a lot of time to translate, especially manual software and even advertising. So you need a translation tool. What it does is you give a file, a content, a software, a piece of software into these translation tools, CATs, and they separate the translatable text from source code and give it to you basically in a way that you can translate the translatable text without touching the codes. And this is part of the career that if you pursue this career is basically to work with translation memory systems. Some of these translation memory systems are cloud-based and some of them are desktop-based. This one, for example, is a desktop-based translation memory system. It's a user interface. As you see, you have a term base here. A term base is basically the translation memory systems where you give manually, if, for example, if a company wants to have a certain terminology that is completely different than the actual translation, you give it into this term base and they recognize it and they give it back to you whenever you need it. Consistency is very important throughout translation when you translate. You see that these reddish parts are codes where you cannot touch them. So the tool automatically blocked the code from being touched or manipulated with. You just go from you translate strings. For example, this one is into French. You have your term base here. Later on, we're going to go to what it is actually when what's inside a CAT tool. We had a CAT tool, a translation, a computer-aided translation consists of translation memory system, which are these term bases. And then they also have dictionaries where they can retrieve previously translated text. Because a lot of these companies, that's where localization tools comes in handy. A lot of these companies give out updates, constantly updates, and new updates need new translation and localization. So what it does is when you give the new update into these translation memory systems, you don't have to do the job twice because the translation memory does it for you. You only have to go manually over the parts that is new and translate them, basically that localize them. And it also has machine translation. Like, for example, Google has machine translation, but you can't really trust machine translations. They need definitely reviewing and manually being taken care of at some points, because, you know, as much as machine translations are good, but they can make mistakes. Only with human help can you be absolutely concise and do a great job. So basically, you want to have these this localization tools. Some of the localization tools, as I said, they're cloud now, especially nowadays in the 21st centuries, we have cloud-based CAT tools, which are great actually. Previously, we only had desktop CAT tools where translator could just work from home and they were not connected to other translators. Now these ones, for example, Transifex, Localize, SmartCat, or OneSky app, for example, these are tools where translators from all over the world work together to tailor it to a particular audience, for example, right? So if a content has to be translated or localized for Chinese market, you work with Chinese translator to understand the you send it to different translators, and they have a cloud basically dictionary, term base, where they can all have access to this cloud term bases and retrieve the translation they want to be consistent. Because consistency is very important when localizing content. You want to be consistent with a certain terminology. You don't want to translate trash can to trash bin, for example. You know, switch between these two translation. You want to be concise when it comes to manuals, for example. And cloud-based cat tools help you do that. Actually, it facilitates a lot. So basically, this was, as I said, it's a lot more than that. I could give you a lot more examples, good ones, bad ones, mediocre ones, how you can get better, etc. I like to, in the end, I'm gonna give you guys time to take everything in and ask questions if you want to. But in the end, I'd like to show you guys where you can pursue a master's degree in translation and a terminology and language technology or language engineering, basically. Right now, the best one is at the University of Applied Sciences in Cologne. That's actually where I am from. And it offers, one of the requirements is German language, right? Because everything is translated from your native language, which is either English, Italian, Spanish, into German, and vice versa. So it's a 2 years program. It gets you acquainted with all the idiosyncrasies and peculiarities of localizing and what it entails. And I think you have to go as part of the program. They send you to a foreign country to work with localization specialists. I went to China and worked with Chinese on different projects, which is great. Actually, it gives you a great insight into the work of, tailoring content for different cultures and what it means. It's a lot more than just translating text. It's quite interesting if you guys are interested later on. So you have to have a C2 in German. Most of you guys, as I understood, are studying in German as well, if I'm not mistaken. So that would be a challenge for those who want to pursue a master's degree in this one. Now, if you guys have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer a few.
Well, thank you very much, Babak, for this interesting talk and lecture on translation, localization, and transcreation. And now we're just going to listen. You may write there your question on the chat or just ask.
Exactly.
Babak.
Exactly. If you want to write it, so just write it in the chat. I'm gonna put the link of the university in the chat. So if everyone wants to have it later, they can just have access to it.
And remember that you can ask him questions in Spanish, German, English.
Oh, absolutely. If you guys are more comfortable speaking Spanish, my Spanish is not quite that well, but I try my best.
I think that we have students from the German department, from the National University of Trujillo in Peru.
Oh yeah, I heard that. Absolutely. If you guys want to have any question regarding the career or just localization.
Hello, but they can speak English, they understand very well English and German, they are learning the basic level. Yeah. So guys, when you have questions, please ask.
Absolutely, in any language. Practice your language skills.
And remember that you can ask questions or just comment.
Or comment, exactly. If you have any comments regarding if you have any previous experiences with translation or even localization, I'd like to know your 2 cents. Just throw in your 2 cents. And I'm sure sometimes people are just, you know, it's so much information to take in. If you guys have questions later, just send me. Doña Pilar has my email address. I can write it in chat. Just send me an email if you have questions. And if you're from UCR, my office is 270. Just stop by and we're going to have a chit chat on localization and transcreation. My email is babak@UCR. .cr. So that's my email address. Email me if you have any questions, and I'm very happy to answer all your questions. Thank you guys for coming. Really, it was Doña Pilar and Patricia. Thanks for this invitation, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope I could give you guys at least a lowdown on what's going on here in localization world, and those who are specialists in this. I'm sure they knew a lot about this as well. So
thank you very much. We have learned a lot.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, it's great. Thank you. And maybe you I can come to your university at some point and meet the students in person. Absolutely. Maybe in German this time.
Yeah, we keep in touch, and then maybe you can repeat this, or we can do another activity with
absolutely. Let me know.
Yeah?
Absolutely. Let me know.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody, for, as I said at the beginning, for being here with us. And we hope to have more talks on different topics, not just translation, literature in different languages. And I truly appreciate, Babak, that you gave us this talk, okay? And I know that we have here students from Peru and from UCR, and so I would truly appreciate that you send me some comments about the talk, so we can have some feedback.
Excellent. Yeah, I agree. Absolutely.
There is a question in the chat box.
Exactly. I saw it. One of the students I saw that the one requirement is an aptitude test to enter the University of Cologne. I guess that's a language test. It's if you're foreign students, you have to go through some tests, some language skill tests. One of the requirements is that you have to be fluent in at least 2 languages. That is usually your native language, and English is a must. So it's English plus your native language. And German is a must also, which you have to be at least, now I'm not sure, they might have changed it, if it's a B1 or C1 level of German language. So you have to be at least fluent in 2 languages, and that's the test that you have to go through probably, and some technical questions. But I'm sure if you go online and do some research, if in the website, in the university website, they let you know what requirements you need for this degree.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Bitteschön. So thank you, guys. Thank you, Patricia. Thank you, Pilar, and everyone else. Mariana, it was nice meeting you. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. And let me know your feedback, your everything. If you need me for anything else, I'm available. Just write me an email or step by my office. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And
Thank you.
have a wonderful afternoon, guys.
You too. Yes, you too. Thank you,
you.
guys. Thank you. Bye.